You're listening to episode 181 of The Graveyard Shift. How are you, lads?
181.
That was 171.
That was 71, just saying.
And now he's frozen.
No,
he was fine in the
180.
pre...
That's
Yeah.
80, yeah.
Yeah, that's 80 now.
One.
Yeah, you did that.
I did.
Not only do we
Yeah.
have it recorded, we now also have video proof.
This is
So,
this is
yeah.
like the time when you called Alan your wife's name. We
That never
have the
happened.
evidence. Never happened.
If I've learned
It never
anything,
happens.
from the Orange Man in America, it doesn't matter if it's happened. It's still not true.
It's not your truth. Your
It's
truth
not.
is your truth. Yes.
Yep.
I gotta say, yeah.
No.
I'm not
I
gonna
want
go
to
down
hear
that
what
road.
you have
No,
to say.
Alan,
no.
I like your T-shirt today, Alan.
Yes, I'm going all retro on my
I
Joshua
started
Tree.
re-listening to the U2 albums lately.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Enjoying them?
Yeah, actually, I really enjoy the old ones for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. All the way up through. I mean, Octung Baby is my favorite, but it's been great going back to Under Blood Red Sky, and it's great.
Yeah, it's funny actually because before we went into this lockdown territory, I think I was telling you guys, like I was re-listening to a whole lot of Springsteen stuff, going through his back catalog and
Same
whatnot.
here. Yeah.
And just some great stuff. And I think Greg, you sent me through My City in Ruins
Oh yeah.
right after we went into lockdown. Going, boy, this is so true. That album, The Rising, it seems very appropriate. Yeah,
Very
for
appropriate.
this time that we're going through right now.
Did you
Totally
listen
agree.
to his live album where he does a bunch of the storytelling and describing
Yes.
the background of all the songs and like how he grew up and
Incredible.
stuff like that?
Yeah.
That's a good listen. Some of the was it longer than I expected it to be, but it was there was some really good stuff in there. Yeah, you
Like
got a really
your
good sense of his
sermons.
personality.
Like Scott's sermons. Yeah.
I'm down to 9 to 10 minutes these days,
Yeah.
guys.
Oh, that's
Dude, I'm booked to speaking. I'm speaking in the cathedral Sunday after next.
Mm-hmm. 5 minutes.
5
Yeah.
minutes.
Because they're right. There's a list. There's only, because we're not using video, it's audio. So there's only a
Mm.
certain amount of listening that can take place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm gonna stretch that bad boy to 6.
I mean,
Oh, you rebel.
I started in the Church of Ireland being somebody who preached 35 to 40-minute sermons, and I'm now down to a sweet 10 minutes. Where it's funny how
The
that
reality is 6 minutes is twice as much information as I have anyways. So. As my kids say, Dad, you just repeat the same thing 3 times. I was like, because that's how people can hear it better. Like, no, you don't have the material. You don't have the material.
Yeah, your sermon is 2 minutes over 6.
Absolutely right. Over 6.
Yeah. Oh man.
All right, so before we get into this article, lads, how are you guys getting on?
Al?
Yeah, doing well. Obviously, this week is Holy Week, so I've been recording a whole lot of different devotionals and reflections and services and whatnot. So it's a very different busy, and I gotta say, there's a part of me has actually really enjoyed this week of Holy Week in recording the services and kind of doing them in a space and then having different space myself to actually focus in. Because I mean, Holy Week, you do not get to do any reflection or reflecting for yourself because you're out and about and doing a whole lot of different things. So it's actually been, I've enjoyed it on one level. And I'm saying that from my perspective in relation to, I'm enjoying this, but I know there's a whole lot of people are not having a good time
No, of course.
at this stage. And that's difficult, because I do feel like, I mean, there's
Hey, Al?
stories coming through.
Al?
Yeah.
Someone's at your front door.
Yeah, no, I know. It's okay. They're gone.
Okay.
He got his Easter egg last week. He's not
Okay.
getting another one today.
Just in case you want to invite them in part of the show. Social distance, but we have the guests.
I appreciate. Yeah,
It's
and I'm
post John Larry.
Yeah,
That's
social
what we're doing with the
podcasting.
kids now. Yeah, if they go outside, they got to ring the door to get back in again, just so they're all.
Oh.
No, so it's. It's been a good week. It's been busy, but as I said, a different type of busy. But good.
Cool. Yeah.
Scott.
Yeah, similar enough, I think. It was a real privilege to be able to help with the like Archbishop Jackson has recorded a series of short services for Holy Week, and so I've been handling the filming, editing, producing, and releasing of them. So that's been a lot of work, learning some new skills, but it's been really cool to be part of that on a diocesan level. So that's been good. And then just keeping up with things in UCD. Really privileged that they've asked me some people in student services in UCD have asked me to write an article for the student body on dealing with anxiety during this time. So that's quite cool. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. Hopefully have that out by the end of the weekend. So yeah, like again, like a really different kind of busy. I'm probably busier now than I was before this kicked off. Or maybe I think because chaplaincy on campus, a lot of that involves just being present, like being around, and so you're in your office with people, like doing one-on-one stuff. You do a little bit of admin, and then you actually get out and around, and you're like, you're putting your finger to the pulse of what's happening with the student body. You're trying to respond to issues as they come up, and all of that element is gone. And I think what I'm really struggling with is figuring out how do I learn to work from home and live at home without the two things being the same thing. So yeah, trying and failing at that, but hopefully I'll get a better balance in time.
Yeah, hopefully.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've just been digging a hole. I've been digging a hole. I found a shovel. I started digging 2 weeks ago. We've almost struck oil in the back garden here. So I thought,
Nice.
I can't earn right now as an artist. So I'm just going to dig a hole, see what happens.
What's the worst that could happen?
What's the worst?
that
Thank
guy,
you, Scott.
Yeah.
What's the worst?
Yeah. A septic tank is the answer.
Yeah, you are that guy who goes to the beach who just starts digging, going, "Where are you going?" I'm just digging.
Down.
Just digging.
What else do you do at the
that's
beach?
it.
What else do you do at the beach?
No, I mean, Andrew and I think it was like 2 years ago, we were over Connemara, and
I don't think I asked.
I forget.
Anyways, no.
It doesn't matter. I'm telling. But when we're at this beach, we just dug this massive crater with the tunnel and the bridge. It was heaven. It was bliss. So you keep digging, Greg. You keep digging.
Thanks. For those of you who don't know me very well, I'm being slightly facetious. But it's been busier now than it was before. I'll have like 4 to 6 hours of Zoom calls a day. And then it was great. St. Anne's on Dawson Street got a hold of me and said, look, can you help us with our Palm Sunday prayers? And then can you help us with our Easter Sunday service?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I put together these visual reflections.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And actually it was actually kind of quite challenging because I'm used to just shooting everything and having it exactly the way I want it. So you have to but anyways, it was good. So I spent a couple of days doing that over the last 2 weeks. And it's nice to be able to serve, a local church who's looking for another creative angle to help reach out to their community. And
That's cool.
I think Alan and I were talking about this earlier in the week that I find it fascinating that, and I know we're going to get more into this in the article, that each church has a different DNA that has a different way of communicating to themselves, and to those who live in their area. And I think it's just so important that people continue to be true to who they are. So if you're older parish who likes longer reflections, then do that. If you want something fast and snappy, then do that. If you need something live, then do it. But just be true to who you are. Don't try to compete with the Joneses, like like that phrase in America, where the next door neighbor. Don't try to compete with the. I mean, yes, in this case, the Breens or the Scots. Just enjoy it. And
well, Scott would still say the Joneses because of Counting Crows. Mr. Jones is always that main, yeah.
See, I even listened to a Counting Crows album the other day. What is that?
Oh boy, seriously, I hope this lockdown stops.
The song with something with sleeping in it. I'm not sleeping.
Recovering the Satellites.
Yes, that's one.
Yeah. Yeah. What an album.
It's actually embarrassing. I got there quicker than Scott. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I have no excuse. Yeah.
Hey, Al, tell your brother this. Just a little PSA here. Friends of mine in the States just finished. They've actually released them now. Two of them. 2 Pearl Jam music videos and a live concert with them.
Oh, cool.
Cool, right?
Because they just have a new album coming out, don't they? They just released
it. Yeah. So friends of mine have done their music videos, which is cool.
Do you know what I discovered this morning? Do you guys
know? I didn't actually know they were still like a thing.
Pearl Jam.
They're still a thing.
Yeah. Obviously they are. Eddie Vedder, of course, I know that. Yeah.
Have you guys heard of an artist called Dawes?
Crickets. No, I don't.
He has an amazing song I was listening to this morning.
Crickets. Oh, that was perfect.
while I was putting on breakfast this morning, I heard I was listening to a song called "A Little Bit of Everything" by Dawes. It's one of the most emotional songs that I've ever heard. Like, I absolutely adore it. I'll send you guys a link afterwards. But I was really struck by how easily your day can change, because when I typed in a little bit of it was like Dawes was my first thing, because that's what I'd searched for in the past, and then the other one was was your man who did the Mambo Number 5. You know, a little bit of Monica in my life. And I really think my day could have gone very differently if I clicked the wrong one there. But,
Well, actually, this time I think one of the things we're doing is listening to more albums, because you have more time. So just kind of let an album play, and you're like, oh, I guess it's nice. They wrote more than one good song on that album. It's great.
Mambo Number 5 was not the only good song on that album.
maybe it's not even the only song. It's not even the only good song on the album.
I'd be surprised if that was an album and not just an EP. Like, I'm not aware of
a single.
Of the breadth of Lou Vega's work.
7 remixes of the same one. Yeah, no thanks.
Sounds right.
Oh, do you remember the frog song?
Oh, stop! Why?
No, that's two different things. You're doing the Crazy Frog's voice to Scatman John. That's the.
You're welcome. You win. You win.
Yeah, that's the remix we all want.
Yeah, and I'm not going to do the Crazy Frog actual song, because that'll just get stuck in our heads. So this week that was the Crazy Frog doing circus music. This is a weird podcast. Yeah. So this week,
Crazy Frog.
This is the weird one.
This week, we're talking about an article.
Sorry.
This week, we're talking about an article actually from RT1, homegrown, lads. For those of you who are not from Ireland, RT1
actually found by Alan.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah. He actually meant to send it to someone else. He contributed by accident.
Yeah, well, I actually sent it by accident.
That's why I said back in the WhatsApp group, Al, do you realize this could work for the graveyard shift? I mean, like,
I was like, no. Let me take that back. It was too late to take it back.
Yeah, fair enough.
So the article is called "Is Ireland Turning to Religion During the COVID-19 Crisis?" And the article is actually written by Gladys Ganiel, who is a former speaker at Rubicon, and she's an academic at Queen's University in Belfast. And she's probably one of the most insightful kind of sociology of religion contributors out there in terms of understanding the religious landscape in Ireland. And she begins the article by kind of going back in time and by describing what Emmett Larkin claimed was a devotional revolution in Ireland after the Great Famine, where people returned to their faith after a massive crisis. And Gladys describes it like this: transforming it from a land of barely practicing Catholics to a nation whose identity was bound up with its faith. And then she talked about the reaction movements to that, like the Ulster's famous 1859 revival, which was understood kind of through that light, but also as part of like a Protestant reaction to fears about Catholic expansion. And then she kind of takes it to the present day and asking the question, is this going to lead to a rediscovery of religion in Ireland? Like, is the COVID-19 pandemic going to lead people towards religion, or is it going to lead people away? What were your thoughts reading the article, lads?
Oh, I didn't read it. I just passed it on.
Well, I mean, Dr. Ganiel is incredible, actually. You know, I use a couple of her books in a lot of my work, actually.
Yeah.
And she also one of the best female marathon runners in Ireland.
Oh yeah. Like, she's an unbelievably talented athlete as well. Yeah.
Really?
Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, incredible. Yeah. When she spoke at Rubicon, it really was it was an important moment. Mm-hmm. But I think that reading the article, the question about, what was the main question again? It's like, can religion survive the pandemic, or
no? Is Ireland turning to religion during the COVID-19 crisis?
No.
That was your answer in the WhatsApp group as well.
Yeah, that was your answer.
Come on, Scott. Come on. No.
There's a conversation killer.
Yeah, it is. No, I think it was a very, very interesting article, and the I read the whole thing, but because it was like, flip, there's a lot of really insightful information here that not only is being honest about the situation, but is also being honest about the possibilities of, yes, that people are turning towards religion, even though we're looking at and seeing over the last 3 decades is the exact opposite. And so I like that she kind of gave voice to both sides of the argument, you know, instead of just being kind of negative towards one thing or negative towards the other. She's saying, actually, there's a balance here. There's a kind of interesting.
She didn't write this with an axe to grind, which I appreciated. Like she was really just documenting the pure facts of it, which was really helpful.
And if you read her books, if you've read her books, I'll go back to you. I was talking about if you've read her books, she doesn't do the axe grinding thing. She's an academic who is incredibly insightful and gives you a chance to measure it yourself and measure the balance yourself, which I really like.
Like, and one of the things in the article I thought was really interesting was when she was talking about after 9/11, where there was this massive surge of people who went to church, but after a short period of time, that surge just stopped, and everybody then kind of went back to the normality of life and what it was before. And I think it's just a really, I just found it quite interesting. I mean, there was no way I read this going, oh, yay, we're back in the game, you know, but it was more so, it's interesting when you have this take. I mean, and one of the sad things for me in this pandemic that we're facing, like I've had 2 funerals while this has been going on, and it's a really different, it's a game changer in how you do a funeral, in the response of how it is for people having to be away, and like I think in how people connect. Like when we talk about an Irish funeral, depending on where it's based, the beauty of a funeral in tragic circumstances is when people come together, when they share stories, when they get to laugh with one another, get to cry with one another, and they get to share over whatever celebration that there is in that space of coming together. That doesn't exist now. And so you're going to a space where people have to keep space. There's no interaction. There's no consoling on any physical level. And it really is it's a nod of the head. It's a wave and it's goodbye. And that's it. And it brings up the question, how we do things. Does that help? Or does this help? Because people are actually faced with the real reality of this is final. And in that, then people they're coming to the service alone, and they're leaving alone. And it goes against everything in humanity's cycle of doing things with somebody else, having somebody else there with you along some form of a journey.
So do you think this is why the government is given these essential services kind of nod to the religious clergy in Ireland?
Because of funerals?
Not just because of funerals, but just that general, their understanding that there is a level of care that can be given from the church still.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. When the list came out, I mean, I was intrigued to see, okay, where are we going to stand in this? Because obviously we know, and we are in circles where people will be wanting to be part of their community, church community. And I know we've talked about this before, and Greg, going back to your pasta making classes, you know, where there was a community and you were doing things together and there's that interaction. And yet these, like, you know, like I think of what Andrew, my son, he's involved with Scouts, and they're still meeting online every Monday. So there's still community that's happening, but it's from distance. But if they were to say, okay, actually the Scout leader is going to come and visit somebody at the house with social distancing, they'd be stopped and turned away and say, you need to go home. If I go out in the car and I have the collar on, no, I might be stopped, but I'm encouraged. No, you're fine. Keep going. There's not even a question.
Is the key to wear a collar?
Yes, absolutely. But you need to get as far.
We'll do a quick class on for those who are interested in doing such things, to show how you can make one out of an empty milk carton, as I've seen rectors do in the past when they lost theirs.
I got a little bit of blonde there coming in. Or is that gray?
No, it's grey. Yeah,
I mean,
there's no blonde.
I'm
No,
gonna guess, unless you're about to begin your Benjamin Button journey, I'm assuming it's grey. I'm beginning to get a bit of it through my beard as well, actually. Yeah, it's beginning to see it come in. I think what's interesting with that is, I wonder how much of that is an acknowledgement of the centrality or importance of clergy, and how much of that is saying, in the middle of a crisis, saying that clergy are not essential services is just not a battle that we have the bandwidth for, and it's going to annoy more people than it helps. So is this, so I wonder if there's some of it is just a pragmatic perspective, where they were just like, to be honest, like, if we say no, the clergy are not essential services, there will be such a pushback from religious people. We don't need more fires to put out. Why would we start them for ourselves? Because at the end of the day, they're not going to be, acting wisely. They won't be prime spreaders of any kind of sickness or illness. I wonder if that could have been part of their mentality. But also I actually find, I find it hard to relate to myself, because it's funny, because I'm not clergy, but even as a person of faith or as a religious leader, I don't see myself as being, like, I'm not pushing for essential person status. Do you know what I mean? Like, because that's not, not how we roll. And there's a lot of the time, like, my contact with people can be done, I should be able to find safe ways to do the contact I need to have with people. So that's the onus is on me rather than on the government to recognize my potential impact. And yet at the same time, even though I don't have a hugely high view of the clergy lay divide, where where I'm like, no, it needs to be an ordained person who comes and ministers to me, or it needs to be, that's not something that's at the front of my mind. It's not a culture that I necessarily buy into. At the same time, there are a lot of people for whom it can be the making or breaking of a terribly difficult crisis. And so the contact, in whatever safe way possible, can be transformative for them. And I don't want to take on the role of saying it's my job to decide how they should feel about that.
Look, it's always helpful, whether it's therapist or a counselor or a doctor or a clergy person. It's always helpful to have someone who's not embedded in a situation, helping you reflect on a situation. And so, I can understand why. I mean, honestly, the amount of funerals I went to over the last couple of years, I could really understand the role of the clergy in the situation, or the role of the funeral home. Oh my gosh, the role of the funeral home, where they're just going, guys, if this is too, you might not understand this right now. You might think you have the capacity, but we're here to take some of this weight off of you. We have no skin in the game. So we're just here to serve. We're just here to love you, serve you, and let us take care of all that stuff. And that was super, super helpful. It gave us space to grieve. It gave us space to connect. It gave all these things that Al was talking about, which don't happen, are happening less of because they're in the pandemic, which I do actually, reflecting in that, I lament that, because I think that funerals like weddings, but I think funerals in a different way have a way of bringing people together, reconciling relationships, people getting hugged for the first time in a long time, people weeping openly there's such beautiful things that can happen. It still can happen, but at a distance it's quite difficult. With going back to what I was saying there, that I think that I do think essential services in these situations can be a person in a hospital, an older person, elderly person who's not connecting with their family as well, and everybody's so embedded in the situation that it's nice to have someone from the outside going, hey, they're just trying to say they love you. They're not doing a very good job at it. And from where I'm sitting, I think they still love you. And, maybe just give them a bit more grace next time, or whatever, to use a Christian word, give them a bit more space next time. They go, oh, I didn't think of it that way, because you're so like this.
Yeah.
Do you follow? I mean, good friends are that as well. But I can understand why it's necessary to have those people as essential services who still can help others reflect on the situation with a bit of hope-filled perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think as well, there is a thing where if any clergy was to, oh yes, I'm essential, they should not be essential, because that's not the ego that you need.
Yeah.
No,
You
it's
know,
not.
I don't think there's any doctor or any nurse for people, or you know, like when we talk about essential services, like I mean, we're putting everybody on that same level as people who are serving you in the shops, in Tesco's and Super Value, in
Oh
Yeah.
whatnot.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
they're essential, and yet these
Mm.
Yep,
guys are on the front line.
yep.
They're dealing and interacting with people, and I think it's understanding the privilege that it is on one level, but it's
Mm.
also not abusing that,
Mm.
you
Yes.
know, and being so wise, because we are in this space now. I mean, it was amazing to see over in Scotland the health minister who was reprimanded twice by the police and then lost her job because everyone was saying stay at home, and
Mm.
she went and visited her holiday home twice. Like there's something in the mind. Oh no, it's this is what we're telling
Mhm.
other people, but it's different for me.
Oh, I go
Mhm.
to my
And
holiday homes all the time.
our holiday home is the
I
back
split my
garden.
week up.
I
I
mean,
split I
yeah.
split my week up by going to my 7 holiday homes. They're just scattered, you know.
Mm.
But
It's look.
it's the
I'm a
sad.
successful artist.
And it is. I mean, I know. I think it was Ellen who she
No,
got
sorry,
herself.
Al. My
Yes.
holiday home literally is that chair out there in the garden.
Yeah,
That's my
no, well,
holiday
yeah.
home. It's a 4-foot
But
walk from here to there.
but it's where people are at these different stages. Where I know Ellen was getting herself in serious trouble. I think it was yesterday. She was talking about how she felt like she was in jail because of this whole lockdown and stuck in her home. And then people were on Twitter were slating her, saying, if you were in jail, the odds are you'd be cooped up in this small little, 2x4,
Mm.
and yet you'd be stuck with COVID-19 now because of the close proximity and all that sort of. And I know people are trying to deal with it differently, but I
Mm.
think there has to be an understanding of what people are actually looking out for in this time. Like, it's been a very bizarre thing as clergy in going through Holy Week, when it's the busiest time within the year of all the services, of all the different activities that
Mm.
you're going to have during this particular week, to now, I mean, possibly you could get it done in 2 days if you're just recording stuff on the
Mm.
computer and uploading it, and there you go. But it's what you're trying to do. And even in the context of, if we make our essential business a program, we've missed the point. I mean,
Mm.
the essential service has got
Yeah,
to be about
people.
the relationship,
Mm.
of how about how we're interacting with people. So if I feel, I've done my job, I've just done my services, but there's actually no communication with people outside that,
Mm.
trouble.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge I think that an awful lot of clergy face at the moment is,
Yeah.
where was the relationship before this happened?
Mm.
Or is my relationship now based because of COVID-19?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge.
And I
Can I
find
take?
the sorry, I was just going to take us back to the article real quick. We could. I
That's what
think
I was
that.
gonna do.
Hey, do you want to do it then?
No.
Wait a
All right.
minute. There's an article?
Scott, you can go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I think getting to the heart of the article, Ganiel's conclusion is it would be historically and sociologically irresponsible to conclude that these early trends and examples point towards religious revival, which is a very wise statement for her to make. I think it's really balanced.
Yeah.
But she also says, on the other hand, they reveal that religion is adapting to rapidly changing circumstances with some creativity and enthusiasm. Ireland may not see a devotional revolution, but religion may play a greater than expected role as the crisis unfolds. My big question, thinking about this, particularly in terms of like life on campus, is in the past, I imagine, particularly like in kind of post-famine Ireland, in the midst of trauma and grief, reaching out for the institution that gives you meaning. And so you reach out, and with the strength that religious institutions had at the time, it's no surprise then that religion was the institution in which people found their meaning and their comfort. I wonder if religion has the same appeal today, or if for people today this is going to lead to more questions than it does answers, and more erosion of confidence in the institutions than it does certainty in the institutions, and instead are people going to look for hope and meaning in other places? I don't know. So I'm wondering. I really feel like it could swing actually both ways, and there could be some people who dive deeply into faith who never would have before, and other people whom faith might have been part of their life, but having witnessed the grief and the trauma and the sadness of this, they may not be able to make their peace with that. So what are you guys thinking? What's your thoughts?
I think that's a fascinating question, because you can only reach out to someone who's reaching towards you in a way, in order for there to be a connection.
Otherwise it's
So
chasing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that if trust hasn't been, a relationship hasn't been established, kind of a little bit what like Alan was saying there just before, is that, if the relationship isn't already there, yes, you can form new forms of relationship. I get that. And you can solidify relationships that might be a little bit dormant, but not bothering to back or forward or sideways to a person reaching towards you, then they're not going to come any closer. They're going to stop reaching towards you. And I think historically, unfortunately, the last couple of decades, the erosion has not just been on the part of people just not wanting to go to Sunday morning church. It's because the church has stopped reaching outwards. They've become really good at reaching inwards. And if you weren't in, then there was no hands coming towards you to reach. And so the sound of peace also became a secret handshake in a way, instead of that peaceful handshake being something that goes beyond these walls, beyond these, et cetera, et cetera. So my hope, Scott, is that, I personally have found deep solace in my faith. I've personally found that my faith has helped me in times of good and joy, but also times of frustration and questioning. And I would hope that for others, that they would have something within and beyond themselves that could assist them, walk alongside, be with them in this time, but also beyond it. So my hope is that they still do reach out. And I hope, my big hope is that as they look around and start reaching out, that they can find people reaching back towards them. Because my concern with his article is a little bit like, my concern was the church might say, aha, hey, look, validation. And this is not, it's not time to seek validation. It's time to like selflessly walk alongside of people regardless of affirmation. It's not, my wife Alex and I were talking about just like Jesus left heaven, left it all behind, not so that he could be seen as something, but to serve as a slave. The Philippians verse.
And to take on the nature of a servant, humbling himself.
Yes. And depending on the translation. And I think the crazy thing is that I love the idea that Jesus saying, I'm leaving heaven to come to earth. I'm reaching out to you. So when you reach, I'm here. Instead of going, hey, we've been here all the time. If you want us, you know where to find us. Did you not read the article? We're totally validated. And I think it was Alex said to me, she said that this is not a time that it shouldn't be an opportunistic time. It should be a redemptive time.
Absolutely.
And I totally, utterly agree. And so I hope that people are going to find communities willing to be a community with them in this time, and not finding any access tape or velvet ropes or anything like that, or secret handshake. That they can actually join in. They can be welcome to join into this new understanding of how we practice church and community. I hope that is what happens. And I hope further that, again, like the clergy and their institutions don't see this as a validating moment, but actually a moment to go, good, okay, great. What else can we do to serve?
Yeah, I think it's the whole idea of changing the perspective, because Greg, full agreement in the church being so insular and just looking at, well, who comes in our doors and that's it. And our main focus is our Sundays or our prayer meetings or Bible studies throughout the week.
Al, let me say, I also do understand that. I'm not being naive when I was saying no. I understand that when you have a community of 100 or 200 or 300 people turning up and their main expression is on a Sunday morning, there has to be time put into that. There has to be time to reach in and meeting the needs of those in your family while meeting the needs outside of it. So I totally get that. But
no, I know. And there was a service we were recording earlier on, and I've been using the Shane Claiborne Common Prayer for Ordinary Radicals for just reflection and for people to kind of tune in, go through the whole thing. But if you don't mind, I want to read this out by Clarence Jordan, who's a co-founder of the Koinonia farm. He wrote, "The resurrection of Jesus was simply God's unwillingness to take our no for an answer. He raised Jesus not as an invitation to us to come to heaven when we die, but as a declaration that he himself has now established permanent, eternal residence here on earth. He is standing beside us, strengthening us in this life. The good news of the resurrection of Jesus is not that we shall die and go home to be with him, but that he has risen and comes home with us, bringing all his hungry, naked, thirsty, sick prisoner brothers with him." And when I read that, I was like, that's the point. I mean, when we think of resurrection, there's another book I was going through before coming up to Easter called Resurrecting Easter, and understanding, how the East have got the picture of the resurrection so much better than the West has the picture of the resurrection. Of this was not just, okay, Jesus died and this, we all get to go to heaven, but it's so much bigger than that. And in this time when people have had to give up so much more than what they ever thought they were going to have to give up during this season of Lent, that, everyone's been enforced on this. Well, no, you have to give all these up. We're in a wilderness. What do we learn? And I don't think you ever come out of the wilderness. I mean, and how we read some of the scriptures of, like, after Jesus being out in the wilderness, he's been tempted by Satan, and then he goes to a wedding in Cana, and it's almost like this complete shift of, this is great. And you're going, no, guys, there is such humility of walking out, of going, we made it. And now let's see how different life is. Now let's see how as we have changed, what do we take back up? Or what do we keep as, this is now a good space to be in and reflect and to be wise with how we declare this good news? Because it is good news. I mean, there's no denying or escaping the good news. But I think what the church has done in some ways is, yeah, it's good news, but there's a whole lot of bad news that you need to realize before you know what the good news is.
There's no good news without bad news.
Yeah, absolutely. and I think it's having a different perspective. And I really do hope and pray that in this space that the church finds itself in, that actually it does reflect that well, and saying, well, where do I find myself and who am I, let alone who you are, and actually knowing and understanding how we relate to each other.
Yeah, I definitely find the tension difficult of the God of resurrection that I celebrate at Easter, who is, the redeemer of stories, and who will be the redeemer of human history, or rather is already, really. But but then in the faces of looking around at the crisis that we're in at the moment, like some of the tragic stories that I'm hearing, and as always, there's that part of me that needs to seek out God for comfort in the midst of this, where in praying for other people, I can become present to the crisis in the way that it's unfolding and people's experience. And sometimes it's literally the only thing I can do to help in certain situations. And so spending time in prayer, praying for certain things and for certain people, and yet at the same time wanting to be like, God, like, just fix this, like, click your fingers, or, there's that tension of, needing God's comfort and presence to get through this, and at the same time having questions and reservations about his character and allowing this to happen. And I think that that's actually something that happens regularly on, like, throughout human history, is that as we wrestle with the heart of God, you almost you find yourself not able to walk away because you don't know how you do it without him, and yet at the same time struggling to fully trust him at the same time. Like there's that tension of that space in between. There's an interesting historical theory that one of the things that has changed the nature of Christendom is that during the Black Plague, the people who were the clergy who felt most called to help the sick and the poor died from the plague itself. And the people who were in it, the people who were clergy who did not. Did I talk about this before on the pod?
No. I'm aware of it.
But yeah, those for whom clergy was a position of power or exclusion, or they put you above people, survived it because they were less likely to be in touch with the hurting and the broken. And so I'm trying to figure out that tension as well of, like, what does it mean for us to be, what does it mean for the character of God not just to be a mental exercise that I'm wrestling with at the moment, but also a way in which I express myself in how I live through this crisis. So I don't know. I don't know if it's going to draw people towards or push people further from it. It's very difficult to predict what our cultural muscle memory will be after this.
Absolutely.
I suppose even when we think about for other people, like Scott, what you're saying about you, like, I mean, is it drawing you closer? Do you know? Because I really think that that's where, please hear me right when I say this, like when I come across articles like this, or I read, other different things, what churches are doing, or where, Christians are kind of standing on sets, or their theology up until now has been a very particular theology. And now that the world has actually, I've always believed from the very beginning of this that this is how I've stood on it. And you're going, no, you haven't. Like last week you were saying it doesn't matter. There is no fear and blah, 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 and shut up. And I think it's the challenge of where's my walk, because in this, I'm so aware. Like there was one of the days last week in doing some of the reflections that I was recording, I felt broken. Like I felt this just sucks. I hate not being out with people. It is great being with family, and it is great us being safe, and we have that privilege of being safe right now with one another. I hate that I cannot go see so and so. I hate that I cannot spend time with this situation that I know is just going to become this carnage as it remains. I and I don't know whether to, I mean, it's not that I would say, oh, I was feeling depressed. I wasn't feeling depressed. I just felt this is crap. I hate this. I really, really hate this. But that's the tension. I mean, that is the tension of, but you know what? God is good. And I love God. And I'm seeing Jesus in a way of going, boy, wow. We talk about these days, and there is there are some fantastic pictures going around, even of guards at the Last Supper. I don't know whether you've seen this one, but the guards are at the table of the Last Supper. He goes, okay, lads, break it up, social distancing. It's just brilliant. And I love the humor that is being brought in some of these areas. But at the same time, I'm thinking through, we've just gone through the season of Lent, or we are still in the season of Lent, which is about giving things up and focusing in on what is important. And it just seems like the perfect example of, well, here we are. And even for, church members who, oh, yes, no, always, it's very important. There will never be, I hope, on one level, there will never be another Lent like what we've just experienced. But my hope is if there'll never be another Lent, will we then have another Easter resurrection, like what we're going to experience, or what we should experience at this? And that's that personal journey ourselves as to where I'm at, where I'm going to be, how I'm different, or how I'm the same, or how I'm more strong in a certain way, or actually far more vulnerable because of everything that's going on. I think that is the challenge for all of us.
Yeah.
I think.
Go ahead.
You're right. Go ahead.
I was just gonna check back in on that. Like, it's almost like the deeper the exile, the more beautiful the exodus, or something. Like the longer you've been on the road, the more of a relief it is to get home. And and I'm definitely feeling that. I was preaching last Sunday for our Palm Sunday service, and I had to preach on two passages. One was the actual Palm Sunday passage of Jesus coming in, the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. But I was also finishing up our cross-examination series, which is where we were taking the words of people around the cross, and mine was, surely this man was the Son of God, that the Roman soldier says, looking up at him. And
John Wayne also said it.
Yeah.
Have you heard that? Yeah, it's a great story. Carl
by this must pray us, Son of God.
But
John.
The thing I really found myself struggling with in that passage was that just before that, it says that when Jesus dies, he breathed his last. And when we're living in a world affected by a respiratory pandemic, where breathing his last is suddenly, that is a profoundly different set of words than it was for me last year. Do you know what I mean? And so there is a new depth of to which we can enter into the tragedy of the story. Hopefully that will lead to a deeper experience of resurrection. But it's hard to, it's also hard to acknowledge or experience that resurrection in quarantine. Do you know what I mean? It's easy. I can understand Lent in quarantine. It's hard for me to figure out Easter Sunday in quarantine, because it,
Yeah.
you know, like the two
Yeah.
experiences don't match.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think-
Easter Sunday classically for Jesus is when he came out of quarantine. Well, I mean, I think
oh,
that.
dude. No.
he's gonna need a sec, Greg.
And then he practiced bad social distancing with the people on the road. Yeah.
Don't touch me. He just said, "Don't touch me."
Thomas
Don't
is there
touch me.
touching his wounds.
You better be wearing gloves, Thomas. That's all I gotta say. Or you can use one of those things you pick up rubbish with, those long poker things.
Oh,
I remember speaking a couple of years ago about that same Palm Sunday
dude,
thing,
brilliant.
and I always love the idea of a donkey,
sorry.
you know. And I went out and I love the idea that Jesus came in on a short donkey, and so his legs were dragging behind it. And the donkey was moving his feet going fast, you know. I'm making waffles. I mean, because I know we're nearing the end of time here, but I mean, the tricky thing about the exile and the Exodus thing is that exile still sucks, and exile is still brutal, and exile is still heartbreaking, and exile is still all those things. And it's like, it's one of the tricky things, like when you're going through grief, someone says to you, they put your hand on the shoulder and they mean this.
For sure.
Hey, it's going to be better. The sun's going to rise in the morning. And you're like, you know, I actually don't care if the sun rises. This hurts right now. I don't want to go through this. And so it's also being able to be present in people's exile.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that hopefully if and when there is an exodus, we can also have that party too. One of the questions I would love to ask in a later podcast, maybe next week or whatever, is just that we hear a lot of talk about, you know, make sure you get up and you shower, good mental health, make sure you get up and take a shower, you go for a walk, social distancing, you do some exercise, you're eating well, all those kind of things. But I'd be curious to find out how people are exercising that kind of spiritual thing where they can, because it'd be very easy to let that thing dip at this time.
Yeah.
You wake up in the morning, you get onto Zoom, you try to carve out some work, or whatever it may be, or you do go to work, or goodness me, you're out the door at 5 a.m. working in a hospital for 14-hour shift, whatever it is. That the one thing that could be possibly neglected very easily, I guess, in my life, I can just say from my perspective, is my faith, my prayer, my reading things that are good nourishment to my soul, so that I can then give out and can then serve people better, because I've kind of got my interior, my core in a stable place. Yeah. And so I'd love to talk about that more another time, but I'd be curious to find out how you guys are practicing that stuff. I'm actually curious how our listener is also practicing this stuff too.
Our listener.
Actually, just
sorry, you froze there, but I'm guessing the joke was okay, got it.
Yeah.
Speaking of our listener, I did like how we were all deemed to be seen in that photograph that was up of the three of us. What listener was it that had said that actually I looked like the mature one? Like an Irish version of Rob Bell, I think is what was said, which made me laugh quite heartily.
Have they ever seen Rob Bell?
Well, I'm just saying.
He looks just like
I'm going to say, well, that's it right here. It just without the glasses. It was the glasses.
I mean, she did basically my podcast life is recording content with old Rob Bell and the Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
I hope that's me.
That's
me.
Yes,
it
is.
I think she said something about me being part of some sort of Christian cult. What was it? What did she say about me?
Yes, she did say
some sort of Christian cult leader or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember.
Greg, has been your dream.
I can't remember if I saw that there or if it was a case of I was also reading reviews of your book on Amazon, so I just can't remember which.
There's good money in cults.
There is good money. Well, just ask Joe
Exotic. Put that out
there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, on that one.
Yeah, seriously.
All right, lads.
Okay, guys.
Chat to you next week.
Have a good
Stay safe out there.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Oh, stop. Why?
No, that's two different things. You're doing the Crazy Frog's voice
Crazy Frog.
to Scatman John. That's the.
You're welcome. You win. You win.
Yeah, that's the remix we all want.
Yeah, and I'm not going to do the Crazy Frog
Sorry.
actual song because that'll just get
Cough,
stuck
get
in our
my elbow.
heads. So this week that was the Crazy Frog doing circus music. This is a weird
Yes.
podcast. Yeah.